Hello and welcome to The Print. This is Triya Gulati, and today I'm joined by authors Vispy Doctor and Vikrant Pande, the duo behind the book Desi Disruptors Timeless Lessons from Iconic Indian Brands. As a former marketing and advertising student, sir, both of you, I just have to say that I thoroughly enjoyed reading the book. And I just felt that you should have written it 6 years back because it would have helped me with my classes. But what a fantastic read, and I think every marketing advertising student must read it.
Thank you. Thanks for those words. Yeah. I mean, we realized that this is a big gap, and that's what we really wanted to fulfill.
Before I talk about I want to start with like mellow questions first. Okay, so first of all, you picked around 25 or 26 brands at
26. Yes.
26 brands, right? So what was the thought process behind selecting these?
So, as the book says, it is about how companies, entrepreneurs have used insights to action their business. See, insights are strange things that they float around in the air, right? And nobody actually uses them. But when people do use them, then they become huge. Businesses grow, and there are many examples over here of how individuals have used insights to grow their business, right? So the growth comes from the fact that it disrupts conventional thinking. Conventional thinking is easy. Everybody thinks the same way. But you can disrupt it, and in that disruption, find the differentiator, which is what most of the brands in this book have done. Right, Vikrant?
Absolutely, Vispy. One more thing, Triya, we wanted to be sure that when we are writing these stories, we are able to get down and meet the protagonist who actually launched the brand. So it was very important that we hear it from the horse's mouth. So there were many brands we could not cover where we are not unable to reach to the person who was responsible. Like, the example of Bharat Patel's, who was then heading Richardson Hindustan way back in the early 70s. And I was lucky that I met him in Baroda because he happened to have a house there. And it was important that when I cover that story, we actually meet the people whose brain was behind that thought. And that was very important. So we also kept that criteria in mind.
Oh,
Almost 18 months.
18 months. Wow.
yeah.
While all brand stories, like if you would ask me to pick one, it will be very difficult because all the brand stories piqued my interest. What is that one brand story, each one of you, one brand story that really stands out for you, and why? Like something that you would say that this is a masterclass. And then of course why?
So uh, I'll go first. So you will see Darshan Patel's name in the book and a number of places, and he has been with me for the last, I think, 25 or 30 years. I worked with him, and he's the prime example of how you can take an insight and break a business. In fact, in his own words, he uses the word toad, which is a very Gujarati word. He says, we have to find the toad. What is the thing that actually breaks the category? What he means, of course, is disruption. So, for example, I can give you the example of Move. Now, Move is an old brand, but I'll give that example. So, one of the key insights about Move, there were many actually, which he used was that women do not, women apply balms on themselves, get a sister to apply it, get a neighbor to apply it, get anybody else to apply it except their husband, who is right there at home, right? And this was an interesting and fascinating learning because suddenly, when you can get the husband involved, your market doubles. Because now the market is now looking at not the woman, they're looking at the husband who sees himself as playing a critical role and therefore enhances the use of the product. So that's an example of a simple insight that women in India do not apply things on themselves, or sorry, they apply things on themselves or get somebody else to apply them, but they do not get their husband to apply them. So that's one to start off with. Right?
Yeah, many favorites. I mean, but I'll give an example of the brand you mentioned, Priya, Maggie, and it's fascinating that Nestle as a multinational, unlike many other multinationals who think very conventionally, Nestle decided to launch Maggie as a child product, unlike an adult product, which is what it is in South Asian countries, where you buy a packet of ramen or Maggie noodles, pour hot water, and then use chopsticks to eat it. But the focus group found out that the gap was that when children come from home, they're hungry, and that's the whole single line, "Mummy bhook lagi hai, bas 2 minute," and they continued with that. The beauty was that they continued with that for the first 15, 20 years till this generation actually grew up and started eating Maggie when they went to college and PG hostels and became bachelors, And I thought that that was a fascinating insight, which where they found out that for a food product to become successful, it has to become a part of your daily consumption. And I've used the example of Kellogg's, which failed badly in India, where they came with the typical American arrogance that we'll change the breakfast habits of Indians, and that doesn't happen. Indians don't eat cold cereals. Indians are not eating cold cereals, and for 15, 20 years they have struggled. Maggie, despite being Nestle being a multinational, did not fall for that and understood the Indian insight, what a mother wants when she wants to serve her child, and the involvement of the mother, and the whole imagery of showing carrots and peas, and the way she's preparing it, though it's a fast food, but they've shown the mother preparing it because the mother wants to be involved and say that I made this meal for my child. I didn't pick up a packet and put it in boiling water and just gave it. And a lot of these things brilliantly came about, and Maggie today is a almost generic name for noodles.
So
You
you
know,
mentioned, yeah.
one measure of how an insight can be used is how long that insight lasts. So I give the example of Vicks, for example. Now, Vicks has been there for before you were born, Priya, and it's been there forever. On that same one insight, that originally Vicks was a medicine for a cold, and there's no medicine for a cold, as we know. So
Yeah.
it started off as a medicine, and everybody forgot about what that role of Vicks was. The role of Vicks actually was the hand of the mother on the child's chest.
Yeah, so actually, when Vikrant sir mentioned about the Maggie targeting that mother instinct, I had a question on it. Just, be it brands like Vicks, Maggie, Nysel, they successfully tapped into the emotion of mother's touch. Do you believe that this, maternal emotional anchor remains the most potent tool, like because it is like 100% success guarantee formula for Indian brands, or now you think that it is becoming like, it's done to death now, let's stop it? Because recently Dettol did a beautiful campaign, which I personally like, but in the end, if you look at it, it was all about that, that mother's touch, that the boy is finally crying in his mother's arm. So, like, is it 100% success formula, or do you think that now it's done to death?
See, by definition, an insight that cannot last forever. So, by definition, what is an insight? The way I define it, I like my definition, which is an insight is a consumer truth that has not been articulated. A consumer truth that has not been articulated is an insight, right? Now, you cannot port insights into various things. So, just because Mother's Touch work for brand A doesn't mean I can take a Mother's Touch and put it into and plug it into any other brand. The insight has to be relevant to the brand, it has to be relevant to the category. See, relevance, Priya, is the most important factor in branding. Because most brands go wrong because they become irrelevant to the category or to what they are talking about.
Hmm. Right. So I
I would like
remember.
to add,
Yeah, yeah. Please,
sorry,
please.
Priya. I would
No
like to add
worries.
that Vicks and Maggie found the beautiful combination. You still remember the Jugal Hansraj ad where he comes from drenched, wet in rains, and the mummy says, "मैंने कहा था बाहर मत जाओ, खांसी सर्दी हो जाएगी." And then he says, "Mummy, happy birthday." And that whole imagery of the mother putting the Vicks balm on the child's chest, And similarly, the mother preparing that Maggi noodles and then the children slurping it, it has to be relevant. The mother's angle cannot be used just because the mother is a great emotion. It has to be,
Correct.
it should gel with the product and the brand very well.
Absolutely. Relevance is the key word over here because most brands lose it on relevance.
So, you both just now spoke about the significance of an insight, right? I remember back in college when we would work on brands, and we of course the primary thing was to do market research. So we would go on ground with those papers and get it filled, and then somebody would put it together, assess it, and draw out the insights. But there are two examples. I think there were more, but two examples from the book that I remember. One was Goodnight and Volvo buses. The market researcher said that this will not work. The India doesn't need this product, but those respective people still went ahead, and they went ahead to create the brand. And what a success! Goodnight is a staple in our households today, right?
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
my question is that when does entrepreneurial conviction crosses the line, and you make sure that it doesn't become like corporate arrogance? Like, how does a brand know that
So,
which side to be on?
Priya, that's a terrific question. And very few people actually ask this question. Because what most people do is you take marketing research, for example. They take marketing research as gospel truth. Marketing research ने ये बोला तो हमने करना पड़ेगा. No, that's where a good entrepreneur, a good a good person with a good mind says that is this is what conventional wisdom is telling me. Marketing research is telling me what even I would have known, right? That's conventional wisdom. Can I find a way around it? Can I find another way to look at it? It's a function of how can I look at something differently. The thought that Darshan Bhai talks about is to take what is known, to take what is even market research, and see how I can see it differently. I think that is very, very important. We often take research literally. And I think that's about the most dangerous thing you can do. Steve Jobs very famously talked about not doing research, not believing in research. What he was talking about was precisely this: not believing and taking literally what research will come back and tell you, right? As like I think in the
Priya,
book, it's mentioned
I'll,
that
yeah,
if you had asked Henry Ford what would you want, they would say people would say faster horses, right?
faster horses, not a car.
Yeah,
Volvo was a great example where the market research very clearly said that you can sell two or three buses in a year, and the first employee of Volvo, Akash Pasi, very clearly believed that if I have such a fantastic product and people are suffering when it comes to intercity travel, going from Bombay to Pune, Bangalore to Chennai, Baroda to Ahmedabad or Baroda to Bombay, it very clearly requires people will be extremely happy. And today, if you see, in your recent times, Priya, would you have noticed people are willing to pay 60 to 70% more to travel by Vande Bharat than a Shatabdi because you're getting a better experience. So people are willing to pay a lot more. India is value conscious. India is not frugal. India is value
exactly. Well
conscious.
said.
Yes, if you give the right value, people are willing to pay the money. So, and that's what Volvo showed, that my bus was so different from what is available in India that people will willingly pay 60-70% more because they're getting a fantastic comfort. So as Apple is a great example where they didn't go, Steve Jobs didn't go and ask people. He created a product which he knew is fantastic, and there's no point in asking because people have not even seen that. So how do you even respond? So that's what a great marketer does, where the intuition tells him a lot more than asking people.
So another thing was that when I was reading about the story of Goodnight, more than the conviction in the brand, what really intrigued me was the name. And often we tend to like be overly creative and name our products in such a way that people like there is a shampoo brand which I still struggle to pronounce, and I'm not able to pronounce it right. And I every time I have to pronounce it,
Cough,
I
cough.
yeah, exactly. I personally, and I have no shame because, and I would say that, like, if I asked 50 people, 40 people won't be able to pronounce it. But on the other hand, you have good night. It's such a simple word. Like, how both of you assess good night's brand story, and more than the conviction, the naming of it, and how important is the name of a product?
Let me
I
take
will
this,
I will
Vikrant.
ask Vispy to I'll ask Vispy to go first because when he's worked with Darshan Bhai, the naming of the brand, and Vispy is an expert in brand naming and why a simple name resonates beautifully. So Vispy, then I'll talk about Goodnight.
Yeah. So, Triya, one of my companies is a company called Cognito, which is a naming company. It's a naming and name research company. So we do a lot of name work. And one of the things that we said that we always say is that a name not only has to be memorable, it has to be sayable. Schwarzkopf being an example. Many years ago, we were doing work for magazines, and the question of the magazine called ELLE came up. And one of the things we found that bookshops could not sell that magazine. Roadside bookfellows could not sell because people didn't know how to ask for it. LA Dena, El Dena, Ilele Dena, they didn't know how to pronounce it. They didn't know how to say it.
Right.
So now Darshan Bhai, who has worked with me for like 35, 40 years, has never given me a naming assignment because he believes he can name the product better than I can, and which is true because he names them instinctively. You got cracked heels, call it crack. Your elbow doesn't move, call it move. Your skin itches, call it itch card. Now that is, uh, uh, Vikrant, am I allowed to make little side comments? So some years ago, I bought a farm, and the farm had a name. It was called Mishri Farm, and the word Mishri had fallen off. So on the gate, it was only farm. So I was telling my son, who also knows Darshan, that this must be Darshan's farm because you've named it exactly what it is. Anyway, that's an aside. So,
Yeah.
but this is
Coming back
precisely
to
so.
Goodnight.
Take Goodnight for example. Exactly, brilliant naming. What can be more evocative and to the point than a good night,
Right. Yeah.
Vikrant?
Yes, and I was talking to some of the people behind this, and I spoke to what is R. Mohan, who was actually called Goodnight Mohan because he created that product. And as Vispy said, it was very simple that at the end of the in the morning, if you had a good night because of good night there in the room and you slept well and the mosquitoes did disturb you, it's a fantastic. So it's so easy to resonate and people understand that so well. And the only thing change he made was he added a K to make it a good night with a K as a the British night. But it was just a simple word which resonates. And as Vispy mentioned, crack cream, live on, move, set wet gel. Darshan Bhai is an expert in the simplicity of the name, which just resonates so beautifully with the customer.
Right. Your book introduced me to one word, and I am definitely going to use it and I will remember it. That's blue ocean. Now, for our audience, I will just explain that blue ocean is that when a brand creates a new market category, right? Now, I have a question to both of you. For example, let's take, I think you gave the example of Jockey, right? That it got, what do you say? It got
Underwear out of
underwear
the closet. Yeah.
out of the closet, right? Now, a brand has created a category. How does it stay on top of that category? Because if one person has done it, naturally more brands will follow up. So how does that brand stay at the top?
I'll give you an example. Vikrant, may I give an example of how a brand can create a category? And Priya, I know this because I was part of this even before the category began. So I'll just give you a little story. So this is many, many, many years ago. So Darshan briefed me saying that Vispy, I want to launch a shampoo and go and find out what we can about the shampoo. And I came back and said, look, the shampoo market is completely overcrowded and you will just have to work very hard to do that. But there is another market that is way open, which is the market of falling hair. Now, there was no product for falling hair. And when we spoke to ladies about falling hair, they had no answer. Answer was things like vitamins were less, or God said this, or all sorts of reasons why hair would fall. But
Right.
there was no meaningful understanding of why hair would fall. Till we probed deeper and we realized that the hair was falling because of what the woman was doing. So we looked at women with shoulder hair length, as like you have, and after a shower, after a shampoo, your hair gets clumped up and
Entangled.
gets
Yeah.
knotted. And what do women do? They do like that, like that, like that, like that, like that, and that causes breakage. So there is no falling hair, there is broken hair, and there's a huge difference between
Yeah.
broken
Right.
hair and falling hair.
Falling hair.
And so,
Right.
therefore, there was a need to find a product that would prevent breakage. And that's what Livon was. Livon was the first product of its kind, which you could, after a shampoo, you would apply just a little bit of Livon. It would coat each hair, and you could just move your comb through it like that, elegantly. No tugging, no pulling, no breaking. Livon created a category called a serum which would then not cause breakage. In fact, uh, the category was so interesting that shopkeepers did not know where to keep Livon. Is it a shampoo? Is it a thing? Is it something else? ये कहाँ रखे उसको? But there was no category, and that's a prime example of how we can create a category that is so new that even
Correct.
your retailer doesn't know what to do with it. And of course, Livon now
I'll
continues and is the market leader,
Yes,
etc.,
I'll
etc., etc.
I'll come back to Triya on Jockey, and we spoke to the Jockey promoter, the Genomels, and it was very interesting that uh, what Jockey has done was very aspirational. As we have mentioned, got the underwear out of the closet because before that, undergarments were sold below the drawer. He takes it out in a shoe box and shows it. They were very conscious that we are going to use Caribbean models. We are not going to use Indian models. They don't have any Indian heroes, and it's so confusing whether is it Salman Khan, is it Ritik Roshan, is it, people just mix up so much because they keep shifting. They're very clear that this is an aspirational product. People are willing to pay money for something which they've seen abroad or they know that it is quality wise something better. So they're stuck to two or three things over the last 30 years. One, they do not use Indian models. They don't use any Indian heroes. They insisted on the shopkeeper that the brand on the product has to be displayed prominently in the shops. It's not a very surreptitious sale. I want people to come and ask for it by name and it should be visible because that's the visible aspiration which I'm showing to a customer. So being consistent about your messaging and what you want to portray to the customer makes the category remain in the blue ocean for a long time.
Right. You spoke about Jockey and the way the underwears were sold, and it only pushes me to ask the next question, which is that for a very long time, sanitary pads were sold in those black packets, and even
Absolutely.
today, if you go to tier
Absolutely.
two cities or tier three cities, it's still wrapped in
Yeah.
a packet because it's like it's shameful.
Embarrassing. Yeah.
You cannot just openly give it. And then we have Whisper. Like
Yeah.
Whisper, I think as much as I remember from the book, Whisper was the first brand to show the blood instead of the
Red.
bleeding.
Yes,
Red
Yeah,
blood. Yeah.
show red.
red, red, yes. Instead of the bluing. Now my question is that at this when you have a product and you know that there is a certain taboo attached to it. Now, if you're going to do anything which against the society, then you are going to get a backlash, right? Which I would want to call, I don't want to call it a backlash, I would call it a customer feedback. Like, for example, I roll out a campaign with a sanitary pad, and 50 people text me that this is against our values, right? So, how important is it, and how to select which customer feedback you should take seriously and which customer feedback you should like put aside?
You know,
Because in the
you
end, your objective is to break a taboo with your brand.
you talked about breaking a taboo, and there are different kinds of taboos. There are taboos that are inherently, intrinsically wrong. And then there are taboos which have been made wrong by society. But a large portion of society wants to break that taboo. For example, every woman wants to break that taboo. Every woman knows that menstruation is not a bad thing, right? Society made it a bad thing. Society did all of that. That means it is a almost it's a taboo waiting to be broken. You get what I'm saying? It is on the verge of it. And so what Whisper did was they just rode that tide, and they said, okay, this is ripe for breaking. If you talk to women, women don't like to be uh, shoved into the closet by saying that they menstruate and others don't. The
Yeah.
menstruation is, see, the moment you have a taboo, then it's almost implying that this is a bad thing. What Whisper
See,
did
again,
was
coming
he said
back
it's
to
not a bad thing.
uh, the example of Jockey, Whisper, it again goes back to the belief in the product and continuing with that belief for a few decades. One was red, the other was a very, very long thought program which Procter and Gamble runs, which is called Keeping Girls in School. And they very clearly they showed that why girls are missing out on those 4 or 5 days in a month just because she has periods and she need not miss her classes. And it resonated so beautifully with mothers and the daughters because they didn't want to miss classes, but because they're forced to, because of social taboo, as Vispy said, that is the taboo which needs to be broken. And
Right.
the commitment of Procter and Gamble was that they would consistently, when Renuka Shane came out with her ad in Doordarshan, it was a game changer. Nobody had spoken so openly about periods on Doordarshan, and Renuka Shane comes and says, "आज मैं आपसे कुछ कहना चाहती हूँ." And then in a very honest manner, she talks about how she finds a problem during those 4 or 5 days, and that was a very bold decision, which Procter and Gamble even today is earning a lot of dividends on.
Now, what I personally felt when I studied the deo industry, that deodorant or perfumes, they were always sold as something which is lifestyle, right? You spray it, women will run after you, or it is just like, you want to become like this actor, you spray it. Fog was, it cut the noise. It was like, you buy our product, you get more sprays, right? And it somewhat falls into that functional value driven category, right? At the same time, and then you have this lifestyle and emotional driven category. Nowadays, like if I just talk about in the last decade that you have closely watched the industry, where are the consumers heading? Like where is the inclination?
So I'll just answer that a little bit since I worked on fog right from the beginning. So at that time, Axe was the market leader, and Axe said if you did fuss fuss like that, women will jump out of you from wherever. Correct. Number of things happened. So what we also did was we researched Axe, and one of the things we found was that there was a high level of incredibility, incredulity from amongst
Incredible.
people that this doesn't really happen.
Yeah.
I have done this fuss fuss, nobody jumped at me. So, so there's a built-in built-in disbelief in what you are saying. There's a built-in credibility issue in what you are saying. So that was in fact a great starting point for Fog. In fact, the ad agency's first round of things that they brought for Fog showed another Axe equivalent.
Hmm.
They do this, women will jump at you. And what they didn't realize that what Axe was doing was also very subtle, tongue-in-cheek humor. It
Yeah.
was not only women jumping at you; it was also there was humor in it, which the early ad did not. And thankfully, Darshan and I did not run those
Hmm.
ads. What we did look, and your question is are consumers moving to a more functional thing? No,
Yeah.
no.
Oh.
Consumers will never move to a functional thing over an emotional thing. Once the functional thing is taken care of, and that becomes a hygiene factor, then it is emotion that will sell.
Oh,
So
okay.
even though I'm showing that it makes sense because you're not wasting fog, हवा में नहीं जा रहा है.
Hmm.
The emotion over here is the person, the woman or the man thinking that, that makes sense, and I'm a smart guy for thinking that, and that is the emotion. You get what I'm saying? Right. So the emotion is a hidden emotion.
Right.
It is not your
Not
in
the
your face
overarching.
emotion or crying and weeping, etc.
Yeah.
It is,
I think
it is. You remember the
to
old Lalita ji Samajhdari hai? It is
surf
that
and
emotion. I am,
Surf.
yeah,
Yeah.
correct. I am
you
smart.
know what Vispy says, Triya, is what today your generation or the even the later generation now, and we were talking about brands which are disrupting the market, where they are appealing to the intelligence of the customer and not just emotion. So if you look at a lot of brands today in the health space, in the wellness space, customers are buying products which are genuine, which are true to their what they put on the label. They are not trying to fool the customer. They are offering a product which is essentially honest. And a lot of brands today are disrupting traditional old age brands because of the, I would not use the word dishonesty, but because of lack of very transparent honesty which the traditional brand did not show. And you see a lot of that happening in the food space, in the restaurant space, in the wellness space. And we were just yesterday talking about many of these brands which are now disrupting traditional brands which have been around for 40, 50 years. And Gen Z and today's generation is very clear that they would want to buy products and brands which resonate with their ideas of intelligence. And I'm not here to get fooled by some
Correct.
woman jumping out of the closet on me. I'm going to buy something which is genuine.
And that, in
Right.
fact, that is the emotion. I am not a fool. I'm not an idiot. What do you
Yeah.
take me for?
Right.
That is the reaction that is now a well-deserved reaction by the modern generation.
One thing I noticed is that in the 26 brands, there was no liquor brand. So I want both of you to give your comments on like the whole art of advertising and marketing a liquor brand, and has is do we have a success template in the industry or no?
I think you'll have to wait for Desi Disruptors 2 to come along. There were there were so many brands that we had to cull it down to something that was handleable. Correct. But 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 we can talk very briefly about liquor brands that I have worked on, but they're not in the book. So, for example, one of the things that liquor companies in earlier days used to always talk about was fantasy, was about escape, that people drink for escapism, people drink to fantasize, people drink, etc. All of that. And one of my earliest works was the realization that people do not drink to escape to something, they drink to escape from something. Right? So there's a difference. So all the earlier advertising would show, glamorous women, locations, etc., where you are escape. If you drink this, you will escape to that. Whereas the reality was that people drank to escape from an unreal or a dissatisfying life that they had.
Right.
Now the problem
Priya, just
with
to
that,
answer, yeah, yeah, go on, Vispy.
the problem with that, Vikrant, is that how do you show unhappiness in an ad? People drink to escape unhappiness. How the hell do you show unhappiness in an ad? Correct? So those are the kind of issues that come up. I'll tell you another example. So Asian Paints, as you know, we've done work with Asian Paints for 35 years, and their brand Tractor. Tractor is a distemper, but was used on homes of middle class people. And the question came up that why don't we actually show real middle class homes? We tried that and it clearly did not work. People don't want to be told their reality. People want to be told a little aside from their reality.
Exaggerated reality.
I don't want to be told about how ugly my house looks. Sure, it doesn't look like a palace. Don't show me a palace. I will never believe you. But surely I can show a little better than that. Right? So there's a place for reality when you communicate.
Right.
All right.
Vikrant, you were saying something?
Yeah, as Vispy said, there are so many brands, and we spoke about it, and we wanted to cover that in our hopefully in our next Desi Disruptors too. And as I mentioned in the beginning, it was also about reaching out to the people who would be able to give that insight when the brand actually started. So I'll give you one example where I could not reach out to the promoter of Old Monk, and I tried a lot to actually talk to the current generation of people who are the family which runs the brand Old Monk, because that was something which resonated with a lot of college students, and even today there's a
Yeah.
very
Even today.
strong loyalty for it. And so
Yeah.
that is one example where, because we could not get the right people to talk to, we
Hmm.
could not cover the brand.
Right. In the
See, a
book,
lot of people, a lot of
sorry.
people, a lot of people live in that live their lives in their minds, right? So, old monk, for example, you college kids drink old monk because in their mind they have visions of leather jackets, motorbikes, all of that.
Right.
I'll give you an example of work that we have done for Thumbs Up, right? Thumbs Up was very different as a soft drink from both Coke and Pepsi. Right? Thumbs Up lived in people's minds where the original research was about, um, thugs molesting a woman. Our hero comes in a leather jacket on a motorbike, goes up, beats up everybody, and drives off into the sunset with the lady.
Yeah.
In people lived in that mental state. Right? In fact, after a while, that mental state stopped working. The era of
The
the
macho
angry young
image.
man, again, something a little before your time, Priya,
Hmm.
the angry young man,
Yes.
that era passed. When that
Right.
era passed, the angry young man's relevance was lost. Right?
Hmm.
That is why when in our second round of work that we did for Thumbs Up was no longer the guy who beats up the bad guys, but he was the strong guy who has deep inner conviction and very proud of himself, and he would do bungee jumping and other things. So that's how an evolution of manliness, of maleness happens. So there are products which people live in their minds with. So people who drink Coke and Pepsi live in a different kind of world from the people who drink Thumbs Up.
Right. There was a little story about Ashirwad in these disruptors, and it made me think that you're discussing commodities like salt and flour turning into brands, and Ashirwad was a classic example. Now, it made me wonder that are they, like, stories like Ashirwad, are they actually creating a market, or are they simply cannibalizing trust away from unbranded and local players? What is your understanding, each of you?
Yeah, so I'll start with an example, Triya. When I was a student in IIM Bangalore, I had done research on Lipton Taza tea, and even today, it is very surprising to find that almost 60 to 70% of tea is sold loose. So there are a lot of commodities like atta, besan, salt. Salt, not so much salt, because salt Tata actually created a phenomenal
Yeah.
brand which was literally the brand for salt.
Because I
And
don't know
this we can
if anybody buys loose salt, at least in
correct.
metro cities, nobody buys loose
Yeah.
salt or loose flour. Yeah.
Correct. So salt is not an example, but if you look at a lot of masalas, if you look at a
Yeah.
lot of pickles, if so, a lot of and this has done enormous research on food products. So it continues to be. So it's not cannibalizing. I think what Ashirwad did was, it's interesting that ITC has used its blending expertise of a cigarette into atta, because a smoker is very conscious of what he's smoking. He'll immediately recognize that this is not my brand, because he's so familiar with the entire taste and the feel of it. And ITC's expertise over the last 70, 80 years has been on blending tobacco, which it gets from various places, from Maharashtra, Gujarat, Andhra, various places. And it has to ensure that the end product, the cigarette, is actually tasting exactly the same as it was anywhere else in India. And they use the same expertise in blending an atta, because when you make a roti, the housewife wants to ensure that the roti comes out exactly as it is every day. But when you buy atta from the market, the loose atta, you're not sure, and the end product would then suffer. And ITC wanted to ensure that the again it's the housewife or the mother here, who is to be made the hero, and the housewife's roti should come out well. And the same principle Mustafa used in ID batter, uh, where the ID batter again the housewife is made the hero because she is finally the one who's serving the meal to the family. So yes, commodities, it's not cannibalizing, but ensuring a consistency of performance and expectation met every day when you use the product, which you would not get if you're using something which is locally available and unbranded.
In
But
fact,
Vispy
one
has
of
done
the
phenomenal research on food. You can talk about that.
yeah, in one of the biggest challenges in marketing and one of the biggest opportunities is how to take a commodity and convert it into a brand.
Yes.
Converting commodities
Cement is a
into a
great example.
brand, yeah, is a challenge all by itself. What are the differences between a commodity and a brand? First of all, a brand name. Second, packaging. Third, distribution. Fourth, pricing. If you take these four or five, I mean, classical five P's of marketing and apply them to commodities, then you would have the beginnings of a brand. So, one of the brands that I work very closely with for millions of years is Ambuja Cement. Now, we can't get more of a commodity than a cement, correct? How did we convert a commodity into a brand, and that to a brand that became such a brand that women ask for it more than men ask for it? Okay. I don't think we've covered that in the book, Vikrant, but it is very interesting that we did all the five P's of marketing, etc., to make a cement into a brand for Ambuja. And then we looked at advertising. Previously, all communication was to the men. So the ads would appear during news time, 9 o'clock at night, etc. It was all aimed at the men because it was believed that men go and buy cement. Till extensive work that was done by us showed that men are nothing but wallet carriers.
The decision makers are women. Yeah.
Correct. That's the my woman. Yeah, absolutely. Because who's watching the ads? The woman. Who's taking the decision? Woman. When a man comes home and say he comes home with Lotus brand cement and the wife asks him क्या लेकर आया? ये पागल हो गया तुम Lotus brand कोई अक्कल है तुम्हारे में? अंबुजा लाना था. Is the mental thought process. And the man says, okay, Baba, I'll get Ambuja cement next time. He really doesn't know one from another.
Yeah.
When a man goes to the cement shop, he buys anything that that the shopkeeper anyway he doesn't know.
Hmm.
Such an
And
interesting way
and
of
sir,
looking at it.
the master stroke I feel was like, growing up, I used to see Ambuja Cement, Ye Diwar Nahi Tootegi ad, and, between two families and all. But it's only now that I write a column on advertisements every week is that, I started I started looking ads from a very different perspective. And that's when I realized that in the end, whether a family stays together or not, it's usually in the hands of the women of the house that they want to live together or not.
Yeah,
So, just how smartly they tapped into that insight and created that campaign. And then you said it very rightly that in the end, women were watching the ads. So, women
yeah.
who wanted their, like, it's also a psychological thing. Of course, if you use Ambuja Cement, it's not like, your family will stay together, but it is just how you play with the psychology of your
I'm
consumer.
very glad that you mentioned that ad because I was part of the team that made that ad, and Baman Irani was the person over there. But
Yeah.
do go and look at that. It's a fascinating ad. I must have seen it about 100 times, and look at that ad again. There are lots and lots of small details which has made that ad so rich and such a memorable ad. It's quite a since you're a student of marketing and advertising, look at that ad again.
Yeah. Okay. When I finished the book, there were three broad um, themes I spotted. One being the alchemy of intuition and execution. Second, identifying unarticulated consumer needs. And third, of course, creating blue oceans. Now, in today's advertising and marketing landscape, I want you to tell me that where is it headed? Like, how frequently do brands truly, end up creating a category? How often in the last decade, like as compared to the previous decade, how often do brands end up creating a category, or how often do you come across advertisements which really surprise you? Like, oh wow, like earlier I feel like they were, be it Fevicol, be it Ambuja 7, there were so many ads, and ads which stayed with you. I personally feel, with what little knowledge I have, that in the last 5 years I would rarely have like 4 or 5 ads that actually stayed with me. So, I mean, I wanted to understand from you that what do you both think about it?
Yeah, again, a very, very good question. Very interesting and deep question. So, what has really changed over the past, and it's a natural evolutionary change, is the plethora of brands now are available. Earlier, there were 5 brands, now there are 5 million brands. Okay. Now, the sheer number of brands begs the question, how will they be different from each other? How will I make a choice? How will I do that? You know, my friend Alok Nanda, and I always have this little thing that there used to be an ad for something called G Flow ballpoint refills. Now, this is like seriously a long time ago, okay? And even now I can sing that ad. It's G Flow ballpoint refills. That's all that the ad said, okay? And we still remember it who heard it at that time. The reason we remember it, not because the tune is catchy, but because at that time there were no other ads. So there were 5 ads on TV. There was only Doordarshan. So with that lack of clutter, I could remember what stood out. Today there is just so much clutter, not only of advertising but of the sheer presence of brands. There are just so many choices for everything. Today you can't go into a supermarket and not be overwhelmed, right? So if you ask me where is everything heading, this is where it's heading. If you ask me now where are the opportunities for this, the opportunities are twofold. One is to do what Darshan Bhai talks about, to find the toad in the thing. How do I make myself different? How can I differentiate? So now, instead of communication, differentiation has become the name of the game. If I can't differentiate, if I cannot differentiate, I cannot do anything with my brand. That's one. Secondly, the opportunities for now finding commodities that I can make into brands become even sharper and more difficult, but now replete with opportunity.
Right.
So I would say
I
that
will,
this is where
yeah,
things
yeah.
are
I will,
happening. Yeah, Vikrant.
Triya, when I was talking to ITC, and they
Hmm.
believe that the extension of Ashirwad into Besan and many of the products is humongous. I mean, they're talking about thousands of crores just on these 4 5, besan, rava, atta, some of these commodities which are available in India since ages, and they believe that there's a huge market to go after. I think one of the points I wanted to make was also, and you as current generation would be experiencing that the method of purchase today has moved a lot from browsing in a DMart store or any retail store to Instagram and Blinkit and Zepto and so many other e-commerce, quick commerce platforms, and hence the whole messaging mechanism has dramatically changed. Because how do I reach out to you when I want to sell a new protein powder or a new multivitamin which I've launched, and I want to reach out to people? I want to talk about the honest truth, but at the same time make people buy. So there is a lot of radical shift happening over the last few years in terms of way customer is not only purchasing, but where he or she actually sees or hears about the brand. So yesterday we were talking about media itself, and you come from the media background in terms of print would continue. Print meaning not the brand, the print as a newspaper, but print media. Even if you look at television, it's sort of stabilizing. Though it's in India, it's still very big, but in US and other markets, it's sort of plateauing down and it going down a little bit. You find a lot more of long form videos, a lot more of engagement over longer YouTube and other channels which are coming up. So there's a very dramatic shift happening in the way the entire communication itself is happening with potential prospects and customers. So that's going to be really defining. But coming back to your question, your comment on the the first, you mentioned three blue ocean. The first one was about the insight, and somebody finds that it will still be a winner because at the end of the day, customers are looking for something which genuinely solves the problem.
Right. I can go on and on asking questions about the book because every brand I feel, we can have an hour long conversation on every brand and their history and the kind of campaigns they have created, and it's all so exciting and interesting. But I think I will end this conversation here and probably keep the rest of it when they see Disruptors to whenever you decide to publish the
Look
sequel of
forward to it. Yeah.
but
I just want
thank
to
you so
end with
much.
one comment,
Yes,
Triya,
please, please. Yeah,
and that applies to all of us that most people do not say what they mean. And it's very important that when you're listening to someone, and it's a constant, learning for all of us that people are not, you have to listen behind the words what that person is trying to say. When the wife is going on the road in a car, the husband is driving, and she says, "Do you want for to stop for a cup of coffee?" And the husband literally hears saying, "Do you want to stop?" And he says, "No, I don't want to stop." And the wife is grumpy after 15 minutes because she says, "You don't want to stop for coffee." But what she actually meant was, "I want to have coffee. Let's stop." But the
yeah,
question she's asking is, do you want to stop for coffee? So men are from Mars and women are from Venus, and that's going to continue for a long time. And it's important that we, as marketeers, as advertising professionals or as brand owners, you are able to listen to behind the words what the customer is saying, and that's where you really get the right answer.
And
right.
that's where we will find our disruptions.
Yes,
Disruptions.
absolutely.
Thank you so much.